So yeah, I'm Lynsey. I'm one of the co-founders of Sharktower. My background, I started my career as a sort of technical consultant, and then moved into more business analysis, project management roles when I realized I was very slow at the technical work. But I've always had a love of data and kind of loved getting under the hood and understanding what's going on in the depths of the data. And really feel passionate that people get value out of the data that's out there, no matter what it is, where in the world. So yeah, I've delivered lots of projects, mostly in financial services, and then about 5 years ago moved into more product focused roles, so product management, customer success, and nowadays my responsibility is really to make sure our customers get the most value that they can from our product, which kind of brings me back around to data, because so much of what we try to do is data driven, and I use a lot of data in making sure that they do get the value. So yeah, about when we started the Sharktower journey, we used to say, oh, one day we'll be able to we'll have a banking project in New York, we'll have a mining project in Australia, and we'll be able to say, right, you guys are going to face an issue because we've seen it on this other project. They have loads of similarities, even though it seems like they don't. The data is telling us that they do. This is exactly the issue you're going to face and what you need to do to mitigate it. That was, a while ago, and we're still a way off that kind of magical prediction and knowing exactly what the future is going to hold. And the two kind of challenges that we've always faced and continue to face are around the volume of data that we've got to be able to make those inferences and predictions, and then the quality of that data as well. So that's what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. So before I go any further, I just wanted to be clear about the actual types of data that we're talking about. So Sharktower is really it's a delivery management tool. We want people to manage their projects in it. So the data that I'm talking about is literally the live project scope of your project. So it's your meeting actions, the decisions that you're taking in those meetings, it's the risks that you're raising, the commentary on those risks, the project conversation that's going on all of the work that's going on in the project, the reg status, the commentary that goes alongside that. The actual plan data, the activities that are being worked on, their status and so on. So it's sort of thousands of data points really about all of the attributes of all of those different data entities. And then it's also how they have changed over time as well. So how did that plan pan out in the end? How has the status of this task or this activity changed? So that's the kind of data that I'm talking about in terms of what we capture on our projects. And then what do we use it for? So basically, the more that we can gather this project data, the more value we can give to our customers by providing kind of insights into that data and predictions and spotting risks and that sort of thing before they happen. So what we want to be able to do is make sure that our customers have more successful outcomes on their projects, and the way that we want to be able to do that is to use data to kind of provide them with the insights that they need to be able to make better decisions. So I think we're going to switch to a quick Menti poll now.
Yep. Can you see it, guys?
Yeah, I can see that. So I guess I'm interested to know what kind of issues everyone else has in terms of the way that the data issues you guys have in project analytics in your organizations.
Cool. Guys, know there were a lot more of you here. Got about 9 so far. 54 people are trying to get half of that.
I think someone needs the Menti code again, maybe. I think it's at the beginning of the chat, if you scroll up.
Data is inconsistent formats.
Yeah, that's definitely leading.
Well.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I guess I was actually expecting a lot more, and lack of historic data doesn't surprise me, because I think we well, all organizations, all industries have just been bad at storing it. So having that kind of access to historic data, I would have thought would be quite an issue. But yeah, inconsistency, I guess that's how can you possibly derive conclusions or spot patterns in data when you've got it stored in loads of different ways. So you've got some post-it notes that you've taken a photo of, you've got some spreadsheets somewhere, you've got your Microsoft project files that you've stored project data in there. So I'm guessing that's kind of a lot of the issues that people are facing with that. Did you want to wait for critical mass of responses? I think it seems pretty conclusive what the primary culprit is there.
Yeah, no, we can move on.
Cool.
Do you want me to go back to your slide?
And I can go.
Cool. Yeah, cool.
Okay. Cool, right, thank you for that. So yeah, I mean, for us, the biggest challenges because obviously we choose how the data is stored, so inconsistent formats within Sharktower is less of a problem for us, but volume and quality have always been the two key issues for us. So why was data volume a problem for us, and how have we kind of started to tackle that? So really, it was always a bit of a vicious cycle. It was, how do we get more data? How do we solve this volume problem? Well, we need more users to input the data. So as I was showing you before, all of our data comes from users inputting it. We can then do stuff with it. We can aggregate it and manipulate it and analyze it, but ultimately we need users to be inputting that data. Well, how do we get more users? Well, we kind of need more data to be able to provide them with insights and to be able to understand better how they use the tool and improve the tool based on that. Well, how do we do that? Oh, we need more data. How do we do that? We need more users. So it's always been this vicious cycle for us, really. And we have begun to start tackling those issues. So one of the things that we recognized quite early on was that we'd sort of built a tool that was great for project managers. It was really, really good for them to be able to track exactly what was going on in their project, but not so good or not so engaging for other members of the project. Obviously, we know there are so many other people that work on projects. It's not just the project manager. So we wanted those other, I guess, user personas to be inputting data as well. So for us, there's sort of team members. We the people that are going to be probably inputting the most data, doing the low level work, assigning tasks back and forth to each other, commenting on risks, on issues, that kind of thing. So we wanted those guys to be more engaged. So we started building features more specifically for them. So how can we get them engaged? Well, we need more of that lower level scope management. We need those features to be there in Sharktower. We need it to be more engaging. So we've really focused on building a consumer grade app experience in Sharktower. We want it to be like any other application that you use in your day-to-day life. It should be delightful, enjoyable, intuitive. So we started making those changes a number of years ago, and that did give us a big increase in the data that was entered, and from those personas specifically as well. The other kind of end of the spectrum is stakeholders. So they're probably going to input less data, but you could argue the data they input is pretty critical. It's going to be those key decisions that are being made on a project, or risks and decisions about those and that sort of thing. So again, it was really important that we could get them engaged. They're a more difficult audience. They're often very kind of wedded to the way that they receive their data and the format it should be in, and they want their PowerPoint deck in this particular way because that's how they've used it for 20 years on a Friday every week. So they've been more difficult, but we've worked on building the features for them as well. So getting that reporting functionality in place so that they can see, where do I need to be focusing? And then that kind of draws them in. And then again, we can start getting more data from them in that way. So that was how we started. We've built out those features for all of those kind of personas across a project team. But the other side of it is really the people's attitude towards data. So even if, for those team members, it's really enjoyable using Sharktower, that might not be enough. We really need to them to understand the benefit that it gives to them. What's the value in me adding the data? Well, okay, you don't get badgered 10 times a day by people asking for verbal updates, because actually everyone's got a clear view of what's going on because it's all in Sharktower. So starting to kind of bring to life for them why it's worth their time entering that data. And then from a stakeholder perspective, you're getting real-time data. You can actually make better decisions because you know exactly where to focus. You're getting indicators of where there might be risks on different projects, and where you need to focus your attention. And then the more they log in and the more that they start entering data and, I don't know, chasing for updates or commenting on people's work, then the more that those team members are going to kind of understand that it's worth their time because people are actually looking at that data, and it kind of builds from there. But that is, it's a behavioral change for all of those roles, project managers included as well. So that is going to take a bit more time. So before we've kind of gone through that behavioral shift, what can we do in the meantime? So this is sort of the things that we've done and can do with lower volumes of data. So obviously, if we're wanting to create really advanced machine learning models that can learn from millions of projects of all sorts of similar types in order to do something like I was saying at the beginning, where we can basically predict the future, we need massive volumes of data for that. But with smaller volumes of data, there's still absolutely loads that you can do. So we can answer specific questions that customers might have of their in-flight project data. So, tell me all of my overdue risks, tell me all of my cross-project dependencies that have associated slippage, tell me all my team members with the most work or the least work. So sort of any deviations that they have from a process that they've put in place, or any kind of behavior that they want to spot, or any particular risks that are specific to their organization. That's all, once the data's in there, that's very easy to pull out. You can do that with just one organization's data. We can also look at kind of retrospective insights at the end of projects. So how can we learn lessons from what we've done on our projects within one organization? We can kind of answer questions like, right, which types of milestone correlated with a dip in team sentiment during the project, how far in advance were issues reported, and are there any patterns in those issues? Are they all associated with a particular work stream, a particular supplier even? We can really kind of delve into the data at the end of those projects. So we can do loads of analysis like that, even just with the basic sort of these lower volumes of data. And then I guess the main thing that we do with lower volumes is sort of slightly simpler models than the really complex machine learning ones that you might need millions of projects for. So we've got a project health score. So that looks at all of the data on the project. So the stuff I was mentioning earlier, that kind of movement of tasks, the slippage, the way that people are interacting with each other. And that we can use that data. We can train it on the data that we've got already. We can train it on the data within one organization. And that can give us an objective health score for a project. And, really, these are just indicators. We're not at the stage where we can predict the future yet, but we can provide these really useful indicators at a project level to say, there's something going on here, that there's a downward trend. Here are some key influences that could have caused the current score, but it's really just an indicator to help people identify where they might need to focus. We've got a team sentiment model which uses natural language processing. So, you can get that, which is trained already on project management lexicon. That's really all it needs. And then that looks across all of the free text fields in Sharktower. So all of the comment fields, every data entity that I mentioned earlier, your tasks, your decisions, your risks, your issues, meetings, the project itself, all of that is commentable on, and we can gather all of that free text data and start to do some NLP on it. And again, what that gives us is a score, and you're looking for a trend. It's an indicator to tell you where you might need to look. You might know why, it might have been earlier on this year and sentiment dipped, and that's when everyone started working from home and it was a change in a way of working, so you can explain it away. But there might be times when there's a downward trend, and really, if you're far removed from those team members, if you're a stakeholder or kind of remote working now, how do you get that feel for what that team sentiment is? So we can still do that with these lower volumes of data. We can also do so with our plan data. we've got a project slippage model, which also looks at that network, and it runs simulations based on the data that you've given it, and gives you a predicted end state. So again, it's just an indicator to tell you where you might want to look, but all of that is possible with these lower volumes. Now, I think we're going to go to another Menti poll if you wanted to.
Yep.
Do jump in with questions at any time, by the way. I'm happy to answer them.
Cool. Can you see that?
We're already going. Yeah, thank you. So which areas of project management do you think advanced data analytics could be most helpful? So I think there's a bunch of options in this one. Interestingly, again, not quite the ones I was expecting, but I was expecting the resource planning one. So we hear so often that it's really difficult to get that view, and if we had better data on it, then being able to go, bam, this is where all my resources should go, would be really useful. But yeah, I think also risk and issue management, I mean, that is such a big field, but I think if we could get better historic data on that and be able to spot patterns and kind of identify where they were coming from and where they could be mitigated, that could be huge. So better modeling in that kind of area could be a really get a real game changer for project management.
Cool.
I think we're is that a question for me, Martin?
Yes, please, Lynsey.
How much data? So sorry, do you want to expand a bit?
Try to kick some questions off and encourage people to get involved, but you've talked quite a few times about in terms of project data analytics being able to predict risks, predict variance, and to give you some predictive indicators about where you need to intervene. And you've said it needs a lot of data. So you've been pretty close to this, and you've got a lot of data inside of Sharktower already. When do you think you're going to get to the point where you can start to get those predictions?
So we can do predictions already. Predictions are pretty easy with lower volumes as well. You can do kind of basic linear or basic regression techniques and kind of statistical modeling to be able to get, we think X might happen. I guess what I was talking about for the kind of millions of records type stuff is where we can go a lot further into the future. We can draw kind of patterns from loads of different data sources and really be able to make those connections between, you know, projects that seem to have no kind of relationship to each other. I think that sort of those advanced machine learning models where they can really go way beyond what a human might be able to do. That's where you need those huge volumes, but with the lower volumes you can still do those predictions. So that is the sort of the next step for most of our models, is that, right, well, what's the next stage in that, because that's not difficult to do with some basic regression techniques. So yeah, we're not too far off.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Okay. Let me go back to.
Yep. Cool.
Thank you. So data quality. So that was the kind of the volume issues that we faced and how we've tackled them. I guess quality issues are probably a bit more relatable from other people. So I'm sure we've all come across those scenarios where we've got null fields all over the place, or we can't link the data together, or like we were saying earlier, inconsistent formats. You know, you can't compare things, you can't get that single customer view because you've got 100 different source systems that you can't relate to each other. So I'm sure we've all faced these sort of the quality issues. Why was it a problem for us? I guess so I mentioned earlier, you know, having kind of spotting patterns across similar projects of similar types. You know, even if we had all of, you know, loads and loads and loads and loads of data and loads of millions of projects, it's still, you know, that's not enough, because the data itself, you know, loads of those data projects are going to be test projects, or they're going to have, the project got canned halfway through and everyone gave up on it. So we really want those kind of model projects to learn from, to be able to do our analysis based on. And I don't mean, you know, projects that went perfectly, because, well, when does that ever happen? But, you know, projects that where the data really represents the reality, represents what actually happened, projects that were managed well as well. So for us, a lot of the issues often come down to kind of bad behavior in the tool usage, and also kind of in the way the project was managed as well. So an example in that little visual is, that's a plan. Each of those lines is a piece of scope. You don't do those in isolation. You do them because you're gathering requirements so that you can do something else, or you're preparing for a workshop so that you can run the workshop. So we should see much more connectivity in the data, and that's something that we're always kind of striving for with our plan data as well, to say, how does all of this relate to each other? It is all connected. You're doing everything for a reason, so you should represent that in the tool. We see kind of a real lack of detail sometimes in the work, that's the scope of the work that's provided. So that makes it a lot harder for us to do any analysis, draw any conclusions on it, because it's a task with 2 words on it, which again is not great for the actual management of the project, because presumably the person that was on the receiving end of that task doesn't have that detail that's required. So you've got stuff that's work that's in progress, but there's no assignee, so who's doing that work? Or you've got kind of work that's supposedly shared between multiple people. Ultimately, one single person is accountable for that. So who owns that? You've got some slipped scope, but there's no risks raised against it. You've got overdue work, but there's no comments on explaining why. So that's kind of the types of issues that we really face, where we're missing that rich data.
We have a question, Lynsey.
Sure.
Our projects have data in multiple applications, databases, data lakes, etc. How do we best make data available to Sharktower, and how frequently should we run it?
So that is something that we come across a lot in the kind of customers that we speak to, and that's kind of what we're trying to get away from, really. So with all of those different applications, and you end up with a lot of silos of data, and that's where you're missing what you can do in Sharktower. If you're running the entire project and portfolio in Sharktower, you've got it all in one place. So what we do tend to do with our customers is transition them away from all of those different silos, so that they can actually have all the data in one place, so that we can learn from it, we can analyze it, and so that they can actually have one single source of the truth. So yeah, that is not an uncommon problem that we see, but Sharktower isn't a sort of data engine reporting layer. It's a delivery management tool. So we want our customers to be using it to run their projects. We can do sort of ingestions and integrations and whatnot, but what we are trying to get away from is those silos of data where everyone has a slightly different understanding of the truth, and you can't really learn from it afterwards, and you can't really get access to all of it. So yeah, that's what we try to help our customers do. We kind of map their current world onto the Sharktower world, and then start to migrate them on to just using Sharktower to actually run their projects.
Cool.
Does that answer the question?
Just a few more questions. Are you able to pull in business feedback into the tool and provide insight on health of the project?
Business feedback? What kind of business feedback?
I'm not sure if the person would like to expand on that question.
Well, I mean, I can. So the health of the project, yeah, that's one of the kind of models that we have, and we really do take all the data from across the project. So all of the, you can see on this visual, there's conversation going on the work items. There's the history of how that has moved over time as well. So all of that data, how well are people working together? Are people just working in silos? Is all the data linked? Have you got kind of your scope linked to the original business objective? So all of that stuff does feed the health score, and that's what we want to have as a kind of objective complement to the RAG status. So you'll always need that human commentary and narrative to go along it, because they'll know what's going on in the world, which Sharktower wouldn't necessarily at the moment. But what with that health score is designed to do is to take data from all over the system that is in there, and give you an objective score that can kind of go alongside that RAG status. So as a stakeholder, you can go, okay, I mean, this says it's green, but actually the score's been trending down for a while now. I think maybe there's something in the data that's giving me a bit of an insight that the human project manager isn't necessarily aware of, or perhaps is hiding.
Cool. One last question. Scheduled data is notoriously manipulated by parties across the contractual boundaries. Any experience of finding better ways to address this?
Is that written in the chat? So that was a mouthful. Scheduled data. Oopsie daisy.
Yep. Scheduled data is notoriously manipulated by parties across contractual boundaries. Any experience of finding better ways to address this?
I'm not quite sure what that means. Does the person who asked it want to unmute and tell me?
Yep. If not, we can expand in the chat. I think if we can continue, we can come back to the question.
Sure. Okay. So how can we go about tackling these issues? So obviously in our case, because we control the, the structure of the data, there's a few options. And one of the things that we can do is filter out the bad data. So, we can identify where someone has created a test project. We can get rid of all the data relating to that project because that's not giving us any value in our analysis or in our models that we can learn from. We can identify where, those sort of BAU projects perhaps. So for us, we want to be able to support projects that are working towards a particular outcome. So if it's a BAU part of the company that's just kind of running, regular cycles of work, that's great for some stuff, but that's not really that helpful for us to potentially spot issues in future for other projects. So we can start to identify that there's various things we can do. We can say, right, we can see a sort of repeating cycle in the naming convention of these works. We can see it's, March financial report, April financial report, May financial report, but there's a lot of shared words there. So we can kind of start to infer those kind of those BAU projects or those test projects. So we do a bit of that already. We have to make assumptions basically on what behavior might mean, what the connections in the data might be. There's definitely a threshold there. So, we can choose to exclude some data, but what's the kind of risk of doing it? What's the worst that could happen if we include it and it's accidentally wrong versus excluding way too much? And similarly, if we infer loads of connections in the data that aren't actually there, what's the worst outcome? Are we going to, predict further incorrect connections in the data, or actually is it worth doing to be able to unblock some of our further analysis? So we do our best to kind of make those assumptions in our models and the analysis that we do. Another thing that we could do is make changes to the tool itself. So we could force users to input data in a way that means our analysis works perfectly. We can make every field mandatory, and that would mean that we've got this really rich data set. But what would probably happen is that everyone would just put nonsense in because they had to put something in there. And ultimately what would end up happening is that people would just be so put off from using the tool because it was so restrictive that we'd end up losing all of those users that are inputting that data in the first place. So, we don't want to make Sharktower so restrictive that organizations can't run their processes in there. We want it to be, really flexible and allow people to work in the way that they want. So that's probably not something that we would do. There are certain areas where actually, so we were talking earlier about the plan data, and actually often if people kind of update that a bit late, then we're going to think that the piece of work ended maybe a month after it actually ended. So something like that, where we can say, could you just tell us when this actually ended? That's kind of getting around those user errors or user laziness in some ways. So there are some places where we might do it, but most of the time we don't want to force the users to do stuff. We are going to have to deal with the way that it's used and infer things from that as well. And then finally, and this is probably the thing that we do the most and will continue to do more of, it's sort of making suggestions to users to encourage them to do it better. So, there could be input the data better. So, oops, you've got a story here, but you haven't got any complexity points and it's in progress. So you're obviously working on it. Shouldn't you look at the how complex it is? You haven't added a description to this task. Perhaps it might help the person that's working on it to have a bit more detail. But also it's that kind of how can they manage their projects better. So, you've got lots of unconnected work here. It would be better if you connected it and sort of said why you're doing what you're doing. It's going to be more valuable for you if you've estimated all of the stories that you're doing before starting work rather than just diving straight in. So we do try to kind of nudge users towards that better behavior as well. And that's really kind of the most important thing for us. And over time that will work, and over time our data set will start to, you know, take a more consistent shape as we start to see that kind of more consistent behavior. And there are a few more, I can see the thing flashing, and there are a few more questions.
Yeah, so a question from Ken. Can Sharktower be shared between a main contractor and subcontractors, or is it for internal use only?
No, it's absolutely as collaborative as you want it to be. So, I mean, that's another sort of data volume thing actually that I didn't really mention. So one of the most important things for us is that everyone on the project uses Sharktower. So obviously that's good for us because we're going to get way more data if the entire project team are using it, but ultimately it's also better for everyone else because there's a single source of the truth that everyone on the project understands this is the plan and this is what the project contains. But also we've just found it so useful for just collaboration. So often you've got contractors, subcontractors, suppliers, just all sorts of different kind of parties working on a single project. It's not just one internal team. So we absolutely want everyone on the project to have access to Sharktower and to be able to engage with the project. So no, it's really important to us that the entire project team are the users on the project.
Cool. Another question. Could you benchmark it against industry best practices or innovation and say if the project is doing it right, or highlight gaps and improvements? Yeah,
so I mean, that's exactly kind of one of the things that we do try to do. So a lot of our, you know, knowledge is based on that, right? We believe that this is how projects should be run. So and that's how we do try to guide the users. So that kind of you shouldn't have all of your scope disconnected and all over the place. You know, what outcome are you trying to work towards? You should have identified that. You should have worked backwards and really kind of built up your plan around that, and that data should be connected. So yeah, absolutely, a lot of the guidance that we produce is around that. You know, this is how we'd recommend that you do risk management. We would recommend that you add complexity points. The benefit for you to do that is so that you can, you know, keep an eye on the size of the scope of the work you're doing, have a better idea of how much work you'll be able to complete in the next sprint. So we do guide based on that, and we kind of try to give reasons for why it will benefit the user as well. But we are trying to do that without forcing users to, you know, always add complexity points or always link the data. So we're kind of trying to find that balance between guiding people to do best practice versus forcing them.
Cool, excellent.
Is that?
Yep, that's all of them for now. Cool.
So I guess, you know, what would we do if we didn't have these challenges? So I mean, I've already touched on some of the things that we want to be able to do, and, you know, that kind of being able to predict the future and know exactly where issues are going to occur on projects is the dream. You know, we want to be able to use the data to make the product easier to use. So if we can, again, this is that sort of vicious cycle, happy cycle. If we can make it a lot easier for users to populate and to link their data, then they're going to be more encouraged to use it. So, you know, based on the title of this task, it looks like it probably belongs to this bigger piece of scope. So, you know, do you want us to do that for you? Do you want us to, we've got all the skills data for all your resources, and we can see the work that needs to be done. Do you want us to auto allocate all of those tasks? So that kind of making it easier for users to use would be hugely valuable for us, and in turn them, you know, and so on. We've got, you know, we can, and this is really what we want to be able to do, but the first point will help us with the second point. We want projects to be more likely to be successful. So using, you know, advanced machine learning based on clustering similar projects, whether that is, you know, similar, either these are all compliance projects, or these are all projects within the same industry, or, you know, these are all projects run by a team with the same personality type, or, you know, anything like that. We can start to kind of spot those issues and help projects be more successful. You know, we've seen an activity that looked a bit like this before, and it took twice as long as you've put in for, so perhaps you want to consider lengthening it. We want to be able to help people identify where in the portfolio to focus. Where should they be, you know, focusing their attention, whether that's assurance. You know, you've got a red project over here, but actually their health score is predicted to increase. So maybe don't go after that one, go after this one that says it's green, but actually the health score looks like it's dramatically trending downwards. So go and focus in that area. Where should you focus your resource? Right, well, we can do that kind of resource balancing exercise for you because we've got millions of projects worth of data, and we know the perfect shape of your project based on all of your resources and all the skills that you've got in your company. So there's so much that we could do in future, especially if we started to ingest external data sources as well. So the thing that I mentioned around you need the human because they know what's going on in the world. You know, if we had news data that could tell us about there being a global pandemic, then fine, you know, that might add a bit of color to what's going on. If we had weather data and you know, all sorts of external data sources, then that's going to just add more color to our understanding of the picture of the project. So there is loads that we could do, and yeah, we will get there eventually, I guess.
Cool, we've got more questions come in.
Sure, yeah.
A question from Fernan. Are you able to measure data noise, meaning that a project is apparently reporting fine, but in reality there are inconsistencies more than a certain threshold when all the data is grouped, so you can define a measurement of whether you can trust the reporting or not? So
that's exactly what the aim of the project health score is. So, you know, you can see on the surface, perhaps reporting green, according to, you know, manually set by the project manager. You could maybe even see some of the kind of, oh, it looks like a lot of the scope is on track. But actually, the health score might tell you that the movement of the data underneath is pretty sluggish, like it's kind of been dripping off for a while. The team sentiment is getting lower and lower. So what we're trying to do is take what's going on under the hood, all of those, the movement of that data, the project data that's going on, and complement, you know, the manually set RAG status or what appears to be happening on the project. We can use all of that data that's going on underneath to actually give you a, you know, an objective view of what might be happening. So yeah, that's exactly what we try to do with the health score.
Cool. And can Sharktower read plans from Gantt chart software like Power Project, Primavera, Microsoft Project, and Smartsheet?
We interestingly used to. That's how we used to ingest the data, but we sort of moved to a more of a drawing tool. So when we onboard our clients, absolutely we do that sort of data ingestion, that translation of your current in-flight projects into the Sharktower plans. But generally, once you're up and running with Sharktower, we wouldn't expect you to have that sort of secondary source of your plan data. Sharktower has the plan visualization tool is a drawing tool, so it's designed to sort of simulate that you're in a workshop, you're in a room with a whiteboard. You're really, you know, you've got the SMEs of the project in the room, so you can really work together to understand what are all the things we need to do, what's the order that we need to do them in, and how do we get to that end outcome. So that's what we aim to do with the planning tool in Sharktower. So there are ways of getting the data in there, yes, but really once the project's up and running, we would expect Sharktower to be used for that planning kind of process.
Cool. And going back to an earlier question as well, schedule data is notoriously manipulated by parties across contractual boundaries. Any experience of finding better ways to address this? And building on that context, progress is reported as X, but it's actually Y, contractor-employee relationships, making sure only good news is reported.
Yes, again, that is what we try to do with the models and with the indicators that we've got that sits over the top of Sharktower. So yeah, we definitely see that kind of green RAG status with its associated narrative. The sentiment model should pick up on that. So with the you know, what we've seen in the past is that there's a sort of negative correlation between a positive correlation between upbeat tone of voice and a downward trend in the project health. So using that sentiment analysis, we can start to pull out that tone of voice as being uncharacteristically upbeat. Like, what's he trying to hide here? You know, we can look at like I said, the movement of the other data in the system and try to work out what's actually going on. So that's again what the health score does. It tries to uncover those kind of areas where we've got people trying to kind of be a bit bit sneaky and hide what's actually going on as the status.
Cool. And one last question. What about project documentation or artifacts? Can it determine that the project has the basic set of documentation in place? And if not, recommend documentation that needs to be captured? For example, a detailed technical design, if only the high level design is available.
Yeah, so what we would sort of recommend with how to do that is quite a lot of our customers have a sort of template project. So you can set up your, right, this is my template for mobilization. So every single project that we do, I really want them to make sure that at the beginning, the first thing they do is, create a technical design, create a stakeholder map. So the way that we would encourage managing of that is kind of set those up as tasks or milestones in your template projects in Sharktower. So you can say, right, every project should kick off with these things. And that's where you can sort of start to spot, like I was saying earlier, even with smaller volumes of data, well, hang on, these milestones haven't been completed within this project. So yeah, there's sort of ways of being able to do that that governance if that's the way that your organization runs. That's sort of how we would do that.
Cool, that's it for now. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, thank you. I think the final thing then is actually another Menti poll, which might be asking quite a lot. It's a free text one. So we'll see how this goes. So yeah, the last question is sort of, if you were in that situation and you had perfect data volume and perfect data quality, how would you what would you use that for? But it is a free text one, so I don't know if we might want to
Sure if we can see scores in this one. I'm not really sure why. Oh, here we go. Guys.
Yep, okay, good, fair.
Sky's the limit.
Great, yep. Please get in touch with me later. My contact details are on the side. Yeah, so optimize the plan. Yeah, absolutely. That's the kind of thing that we want to do. Portfolio planning and portfolio balancing, I think, is another thing that would be incredible if we had that sort of historic data and we knew exactly how you should spread out all of your projects across the year in order to achieve your main business objectives. You know, that would be amazing as well. Quantify project status based on actual project data. Yep, again, that's what we do with the project health score, and that will only get better with the more data that we have and the better quality data we have as well. My staff take on it. I mean, these are excellent answers. Thank you. I think, I mean, that was it, to be honest. So I guess if there are any other questions, have we got time for?
Cool.
I'm all ears if there is any more.
Could you come off mute now, if possible? Now, if you want to have a chat with Lynsey, that'd be really great. Anybody?
I'll go first.
Sure.
Hey, Lynsey.
Hi. Did you want to go first?
Yes, please. Thanks, Lynsey. That was fabulous. We're an invariably difficult bunch, you know, but what you've got here is a group that are trying to push change in their organizations, but dealing with the traditional and legacy world that complex projects bring with them. And I resonated with a number of questions that were put there around, similar to my own, around volume of data, different players in a project, in a program, and the different layers of data. So I guess one of our fundamentals, I think, that's coming out of that is, can Sharktower cope with the current contractual setup where existing contracts mandate that from the client to the contractor and subsequently to the subcontractors, the data must be in a specific file format. Let's take P6XE as a good example, because that's where you've got tens of thousands of lines of activity code. And can it be processed through that? Bearing in mind, on a project, you'll end up having the client's partner or a suite of partners who will invariably be there to protect the client from the contractor world and to deal with the data transactions that happen in there, interpret them, process them, and advise them. And then you'll have the contractors doing their scope, and you'll have multiple contractors who will also have multiple subcontractors. So I guess our questioning, and I can just resonate with some of them, is how does Sharktower cope with that when the reality is each entity in a project will have its own tools?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually that's
that's what we're trying to unearth here. And how do we work with that tool you're offering to make this a reality?
So it's a conversation we've been having quite a lot recently, actually. So we, I guess, kind of sit in the middle of that. So absolutely, you know, so if we're talking a sort of professional services type situation, in the middle, no, on the left, you've got your you need to do your own governance reporting internally. So you need to say, right, this is where we're at with this project. We need more resources for this one. On the other side, you need to provide that kind of that, as you say, in a specific format, governance information, you know, to say, right, we're hitting these milestones or we're not, or, you know, financial milestones or that kind of thing. So absolutely, those things are always going to exist. What we're trying to do with Sharktower is help you manage the project better. So, you know, deliver the project with Sharktower. By doing that, you get a lot of the data you actually need for all of those reports. What we started to do is kind of, we can provide those extracts, right? We can give you, what do you need? You need the status of all of those milestones. You need any associated risks. Okay, fine. Well, we can give you that extract, and you can then, you know, ingest that into whatever format or system you need for those other reports. So we recognize that those other ways of reporting and governance is always going to exist. What we want to do with Sharktower is make sure that you can actually manage and deliver your projects. And by doing that, you're capturing all of that data anyway, and then we can give you the extracts to you know, fulfill any other needs that you have for those kind of governance reports.
I'm hearing that as an additional layer. What I'm trying to get to is, can I eliminate P6 with Sharktower through a major project, or is that a prerequisite anyway? So you see the boundaries we're hovering on. Is it just is Sharktower in this context another layer of assurance analysis or interrogative and insight analysis on top of the mechanisms we still have to use because the current contracts dictate that? Unless
so it shouldn't be another layer. It should be the only layer. It should be the source of the truth. So if you need to be kind of feeding these other needs for kind of other data points that you need, then you can do, and we can automate those extracts, right? You can have a front end for it, but ultimately Sharktower is the owner of all of that truth. So the statuses of all those milestones that you need to report on, that's where the truth is. So it shouldn't be, if anything, the other things are other layers, but it is the source of truth. So
I guess my point is there's a source of truth for each player in a project. It's when you amalgamate it, it gives a different level of truth. When you amalgamate and integrate data from multiple players in a project, you get a different result than you would from each of them in their silo. And they're in their silo because contractually that's where they're supposed to be.
So are you talking about sort of, I don't know, I'm trying to get my head around the detail. So what we want is for Sharktower to be a collaborative space where all of those players can work on their own work, but also that does get aggregated up to a sort of project and portfolio level. So yes, if you look
I'm trying to look at it from multiple angles. So if I'm working on a project, how many tools do I now need to use? What can I eliminate if I use something like Sharktower instead? So my data still has to come from somewhere. It still has to come from some sort of finance. It still has to come from some sort of plan. It has to originate somewhere. So unless I'm putting the data entry at source straight into Sharktower, I'm still having to maintain everything else. But my question then is, given the complexity of some of our schedules, is it replacing P6 in this context? Is it replacing, you know, tens and thousands of lines of activity schedule in this?
Yes.
Does it have that capacity?
Yeah, so it is exactly data entry. So part of the data that we capture is entered directly into Sharktower, because it is literally where you put your entire plan, all of your scope, all of your dependencies, all of your tasks. So that's, yeah, exactly, that's what's in there. Finance stuff is more sort of, we don't want to be replacing complex financial management systems, but you know, we're looking at building that kind of basic cost forecasting, actuals, and forecasting into Sharktower. So yes, there will still be some other tools like any complex financial management, but the idea is that Sharktower replaces your spreadsheets, your PowerPoints, your silos of data, your post-its and various people's personal to-do lists. Like that's what we're trying to replace.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, in terms of previous question as well, it's a relevant point. Do you think there gets a point whereby a project is too big to manage it through Sharktower, right? So something like a Crossrail or HS2 with so many suppliers.
So
that's where I'm going with my question.
With something like, a construction type project, there's also so many there's really great tools out there to manage those properly, with all the safety milestones and everything that you need in place. So yes, absolutely, something like that, it would probably be too big for Sharktower. I think where we can add value is your sort of, your year-long transformation program, like maybe like 100 people working on the project. I think if we're talking multiple years and thousands of people are working on the project, yes, that's probably where it's getting a bit extreme. But I mean, we have seen, thousands of lines of like a Microsoft project file be translated into a Sharktower plan and look a lot more appetizing. So, it can deal with quite a lot of complexity, but yes, something like HS2 is too big.
Cool. Ken.
What's the most users you've had in one Sharktower project?
Off the top of my head,
100, 1,000, 10,000?
Probably more like the 100 mark, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
You have a question, guys?
I was gonna mention watermelon green. You're saying
Red on the inside, up, green on the outside.
yeah. So Sharktower can identify when that is happening.
That's what we're trying to do with the health score. Yeah, exactly.
And can you have any of your clients giving you like we some construction companies I've worked for, we've always had a project email folder where every email outgoing is supposed to be copied into that folder. So if we gave you 2 years worth or 3 years worth of emails from a previous job or 2 or 3 previous jobs, is that a way for you to import and teach Sharktower how to manage projects that we have?
So so for historic data, yeah, something like that sort of historic, like especially for a specific organization as well, could be really useful for training our models in that kind of free text format. We'd have to see what we did with it, but it's definitely, a possibility to run that through an NLP model to train it a bit better on that particular organization's, tone of voice, that kind of thing. So that would be really useful, I guess, in live, once that client was live, we would expect all those conversations to be happening in Sharktower. And like, I realize that's going to take some behavioral change, but I personally we had a situation where we were working with a supplier and going back and forth with emails, and literally there'd be like 5 bullet points in the email and 3 of them would get answered, and then I'd have like a load of follow-up questions on those 3. 2 of them didn't get answered, so it was just back and forth. Forgot to copy someone in at some point, so they get looped in later, and it just became such a nightmare trying to manage it over email. And then we switched it into Sharktower, and oh my god, it was so much easier, because you just had like, right, this is the thing that we're talking about in this context. Everyone can see it, everyone's got access to it. If I add them to the system later, they can still see it. You can tag people back and forth, and you just have that like contextual conversation, and it was just so much easier. So I realize it'll take time to change people's behavior like that, but what we want is for that conversation to be happening within Sharktower, and then it's very easy for our models to pick it up just as is.
Can you read from WhatsApp?
I mean, I guess same answer as before. We could ingest sort of the historic unstructured data and see what we could do with it. But at the moment, it's not something that we automate.
Could you share with us some of your feature engineering for your sort of insight tool?
And what do you mean by that?
So in terms of your health tool,
Like
it's picking up loads of different features. So what are the primary features that it's looking at?
I mean, it's a bunch of the ones that I've sort of already listed. So that velocity is the wrong word, but like movement of work. So how fast is stuff getting completed? How does that compare to how fast it used to be completed? How much slippage is there in the plan? So yeah, lots of kind of things like that, which is basically about the data entities that we capture and the movement of them and the relationship between them.
Right. So in terms of your data set, you spent the last sort of 2 years balancing out those weightings and make sure that the top scoring projects are the worst projects.
Yeah. So that's what we've done with the training of the health score model. It's kind of looked at that, but there's still kind of work to be done on that, I think. But
That's really good. Yeah, really good. Well done. Yeah, good.
A question here from Warren. How does change get managed in this environment?
So it is designed to manage change, in terms of the kind of most of the projects we that are run in Sharktower are change projects. I don't know if you maybe mean like changes to the plan and that kind of thing. Deviations from what we thought and what ended up happening. We can do that retrospectively afterwards, but really in the moment in the project, what we're trying to work on is, right, how are you going to get to that outcome? Yes, okay, maybe this plan looks different from your original baseline plan, but actually what's more important, you need to actually get to that outcome. So there's an audit history of absolutely everything in Sharktower if you do need to understand those changes. But what we try to focus our users on is making sure that they're focused on delivering against that outcome.
Cool. Any other question, guys? Martin just posted in the chat. I think that was a question. If not, I think we can finish early. I think it's 20 to 8. But if you've got any more questions, guys, let us know. Type in the chat or come off mute.
Or give me a shout afterwards if you want.
Yeah, if not, get in touch with Lynsey afterwards.
Me again. So before building a chemical plant or some other big project, we often have a stage called concept design or a feasibility study. And I think coming from where I work, the big construction project sort of thing, that this would be really useful at that phase at that stage of the type of work that we do, where like where Brett, I think, was saying it probably won't keep up with Primavera and SureTrack and that sort of stuff, but it looks like it's going to grow to have more capability, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we will get to a point where it can handle much larger projects, but we might as well start with kind of what we know at the moment and get that right, and then iterate from there. But yeah, I mean, if that sort of conceptual design analysis phase is working towards a particular outcome and has a lot of dependencies within it, then yeah, it is kind of perfect for that kind of thing. Absolutely.